Hello, Seb.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you?
Good, good.
I was just wondering if you could just give us a quick introduction. I know you got it written out there on your screen, but maybe just to those who don't know you, maybe a little bit of background as well.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Sebastian. I'm Director of Digital and Emerging Media at the Cooper Hewitt, which is the Smithsonian's Design Museum in New York. I was previously at the Powerhouse Museum, where I headed up all the digital stuff there and some other units as well, which was fun. In the last couple of years, I've been in New York helping the Cooper Hewitt rethink what it is to be a museum in the digital age and help it reopen. It had been closed for the last three years and reopened at the end of December 2014. So pretty exciting time. So now we're just into that sort of 6 months later, figuring out what's working, what isn't working, and getting ready to roll out the next set of exhibits. We've got some cool ones coming up, and then bedding kind of down some of those systems, and bedding but down some of the change that's gone on as well. It's been a pretty exciting time. New York's always full of good things, and with summer coming around, it's good.
Yes, lots of good gelato shops, coffee shops.
Yeah, it's starting to pick up here. I think one of the more significant changes at the museum that people don't often talk enough about is that we now have fabulous European grade coffee, which is very nice to have on the Upper East Side. It's been a little bit rare over the last few years, but they've also learned how to do a proper Australian cup too, which has been good. So things are all good. Yeah.
So I guess the question we're going to ask you is one that's from the Museums Australia Conference 2015, and that was like asking what will the staff of the Museum of the Future look like, or I'm just wondering, did your thoughts on whether that's more about the structure that's going to change more, or are the people that are in the structure going to change more? What do you think?
Yeah, look, I don't know really. I mean, I think it's an interesting period. I've seen moving into the States that the States has a very different financial model for museums, and that really affects the staffing kind of structure and the sort of staff you have. So in the States, you have development or fundraising teams that often are quite sizable, and in fact, often are bigger than, say, the digital team or as big as the education team, because fundraising is such a key part of keeping the doors open. And I guess the other thing that's different here is because of that, you also have a lot of staff who are project-based. So people, the museum will receive a certain amount of funds to deliver a certain project, and there are a whole bunch of staff positions or partial positions tied to the delivery of that project, and it means the core staff are often a lot smaller than in Australia, and that's both good and bad. I think what's interesting here is that it's perhaps in New York at least a bit easier to get significant capital to do interesting stuff, but also because of the project nature of the staff and the lack of a solid recurrent funding base, it often means that the goals are relatively short term, and the biggest sort of strategic visions are very hard to pull off. Not only because it's hard to see far, but it's also that actual resources you have on hand are only paid for a certain period of time, and you can't redirect what they do to perhaps the strategically appropriate goals because you signed on to a particular grant 3 years ago, which no longer is necessarily the right thing to be doing. So that's kind of tough, and I guess we're also seeing, though, a big turnover. A lot of turnover with staff retiring, which is similar in Australia. I know there's this sort of curatorial generation leaving the museum world to retire. And so I think for the first time, perhaps in 20 years, there's a whole rush of new people into those sort of positions, which is really exciting. But I think it's also pretty tough, because I think, for 20 years, graduates of museum studies and curatorial programs have really struggled to find employment within the sector. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And of course, this is coming at a time when there's a whole lot of new skills required to run a museum, and to think about how curatorial practice and conservation practices and education practices are delivered. So perhaps even the research graduates are not appropriately skilled for the museums that we need. I certainly see that when I'm hiring people with digital skill sets now. There is a real shortage of people with the necessary experience, I guess. But it's also very hard to get experience, because there just haven't been any of the jobs. So, it's tough, right? It's tough.
Well, I know that I'm going to be talking to Catherine Howard in a couple of days' time, and she's been doing her PhD thesis on convergence across the heritage sector, and looking at staffing across the heritage sector. And to me, that seems like one of the things that for the future is really positive. I think archives and galleries and libraries kind of merging their staff skill sets more is actually going to be great. Have you come across much of that happening within the museum sector?
Yeah, I mean, there is, but it's often couched also in terms of down kind of sizing. So where there were 2 or 3 departments, they get collapsed into one, and they thus lose two-thirds of the bodies. In fact, what we need is a convergence with minimal loss, because I think particularly in that area that we need staff who have digital preservation training and skills and interest, as well as new forms of registrarial staff as well, and cataloguing staff to do and design the new forms of catalogues that we need. So I think often what I've seen of late is that, yes, all of these departments and teams merge, but it's actually just about shrinking the full-time positions rather than actually coming up with the necessary reallocating staff and retraining staff for the skill sets that are necessary in the present. But I think we're in a period of change. I think there's a lot of exciting work going on in the digital preservation space and other related spaces too, which face similar challenges. People trying to preserve or at least document ephemeral cultures, and I think that's in a period of flux. But I do think that whilst those areas are merging, we're yet to see a merger that isn't about just saving money.
I think that I know the Digital Humanities Conference is coming out to Sydney in May this year, the first time it's come out. And to me, digital humanities is one aspect of where I think education and the role of particularly tertiary institutions in terms of ongoing preservation of culture and the role of those institutions in things like museums and libraries should be closer aligned. And it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on whether you think there's more scope for partnership between tertiary institutions. So rather than employing curators or registrars per se, that there might be sort of skill sets that are more applicable across all of the cultural and the digital humanities.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the digital humanities space is fascinating at the moment. I think there's a lot of issues in the digital humanities, particularly in the US, around tenure positions and the challenges of of academic publishing and all of these other things that have meant that digital humanities maybe faces other challenges within the academy still that haven't been resolved. I would say, though, that there's a lot of pretty exciting work going on in that field, and to date it's been libraries on the whole that have been able to benefit the most, because they've had the most, I guess, text-based materials, and digital humanities has been primarily text-oriented, although that's beginning to change. But we do see a lack of enough, I would say, collections from the museum sector that are ready for programmatic analysis and study, and I think that's one of the big things that museums need to get on top of, and that doesn't happen without some of the more traditional roles in the museum being filled. I mean, you know, you need collection managers, you need registrars and catalogers to get museum collections into a place where digital humanists can actually apply, you know, programmatic methods of analysis to find things, let alone do, you know, scholarship with them. So, you know, I think that that's something that museums are going to have to work pretty hard on. You know, I think here in the States, you know, the New York museums and some of the conferences that we have coming up, there's some very, very, very exciting stuff going on, but you always see in the museum world that it's there's so much work to be done still. You know, I mean, there always is, and that's sort of what's interesting about it. But I think that we haven't yet come up with, I don't know, I haven't seen any killer digital humanities uses of purely museum stuff yet. I mean, maybe that's just not going to happen, and that's okay too. But you know, I guess you know, programs like the beautiful data series that the Getty's supporting through the Meta Lab is pretty interesting. That happens each summer. Last kind of summer's beautiful data was really interesting and really amazing. In fact, and this summer's one happening in July looks really great too. And those are sort of programs where I think, you know, the Meta Lab there is doing really interesting work with the people who go to beautiful data to really probe museum collections to what is actually possible with them, art museum collections particularly, but this kind of year's focus is on, I guess, ephemeral collections, which will be fascinating to see what's actually out there and what, you know, people do with it in a two-week period. But who knows? I mean, I think, you know, I think it's early days, but from what I see now is that museums are behind the digitization game, and they need to catch up pretty fast, get all their stuff digitized, make it accessible, and then perhaps we can talk about stuff. You know, that's always been the case, but you know, I think it's even more pressing now.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed since I moved to the Parramatta City Council, is that the role of the museums and the archives and the library was presented as, you know, being it's an external interest. It's all about family history. It's about putting on exhibitions. But since I've been there, what I've noticed is that we play a very integral role to developments across council. So whether it's DA applications or it's archaeological digs, and there's a whole raft of things where we're trying very hard to integrate ourselves much more with council's activities. So we're collecting in the local studies library books about urban design and urban planning to sort of think about the future, about future living in cities. And I think having all these collections together and trying to integrate with the council kind of gives a great sense to what the museum's for. But like, you know, what are your thoughts about museum and actually sort of making inroads to the general population and kind of justifying why they exist in the first place?
Sure. I mean, I guess local museums have that luxury that national and state museums often don't have. I think some of the work that New York Public Library is doing in that regard with a very specific geographic focus is fascinating. I was out at the Minnesota History Center just last week, and some of the work they're doing there, amazing storytelling work from the local Minnesota community. It's incredible stuff there, and I think it's those sort of institutions that are very focused on a geographic region that allows them to, I guess, create what the New York Public Library calls a sort of space kind of time explorer view, where you can explore particular geography through time and space, and it's a defined thing. That's very different to a museum of paintings from 1800s, or paintings through all this period, or designed a museum, like my case, or a Museum of Australia, or a Museum of American History. Those are very different types of institution, but often it's those larger ones that have those really diverse collections that would benefit a lot from integration with those other smaller ones that have those specific focuses. But yeah, I mean, I guess there's no one size fits all, and there's no one size fits all for humanities research or any of that. Some museums will always be better off serving the public as exhibition spaces where people go as an outing, and others will be more primarily focused on a bounded speciality, and that speciality may attract very particular niche audiences. I'm thinking here particularly in Brooklyn of the Morbid Anatomy Museum, which is one of my favourite museums in New York. Super discrete focus, super tight connection with its community, which isn't geographically bound, but is subject bound. So there's those sorts of things too, and it's interesting. I mean, it's hard to say what kinds of things come out of that and what is necessary, but I don't think there's one solution that fits all of those. But I do think it would be useful to have ways that we could explore. I still think it's useful to have ways where we could explore all of those collections, or all of those collecting specialities in some way.
Yeah, I agree.
Libraries here. That's all.
Yeah, I think that again, having the breadth of collections, it would be nice to see them open up. What I'm finding very interesting is the actual starting to share of more collection spaces for storage, and not thinking about the bricks and mortar of where things are, but more about what you can do with stuff. And I think for the museums of the future, it does have to kind of think outside. I mean, I know you've been talking about this for a while now, but outside of what the structure is that you're in, the physical structure, and it's not just digital solutions, they're physical on-the-ground solutions of places where people can access this stuff and take it away, or loan it, or repurpose it, or do things with it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, digital's the easy way to do it, but often it's actually the physical repatriation or the loans of pieces that bring collections to life. I think what's interesting about, what we've been doing at Cooper Hewitt is part of the work we've been doing in the digital space has really been about affirming and asserting the role of the physical museum, and bringing a sense that the physical museum has to reassert why visiting it on site actually matters, and making that a primary concern, which forces exhibition designers and curatorial staff and education staff and the museum as a whole to say why this is different when you see it physically. And that's really interesting, and I think that's the same if I'm, I mean, Aaron Pope in my team jokes about relocating all of the museum collections to the airports around America, because those have so much throughput, and wouldn't wouldn't it be great if you're waiting for your plane and you can browse through all these collections that just happen to be on loan to each of the airports? That sort of thing of putting collections where people are and asserting that the physical collections actually matter, not just putting them in a storehouse to be forgotten and have, you know, digital surrogates as their sort of access copy, but having the ability to actually see things and asserting that the actual thing matters. Whether it's actually physical or even digital born itself is interesting too. You know, I think that there's a need, even with digital born collections, but potentially to see them in a context and a place. There's a certain sense of you can bring a focus when it's put into the context, which is often physical, and often that's, you know, simply a matter of the viewer being forced to dedicate time and attention to it in a space that hasn't got 10 other tabs open at the moment and Twitter buzzing, and, you know,
so you're not getting a call to get on your airplane or...
Yeah, right. So, you know, I think what's interesting about museum spaces or cultural heritage spaces, even when they're just exhibition halls, as a lot of museums, frankly, are just exhibition halls these days, for the most part, in the public eye. Not that they should be, but I think some of them increasingly are, is that at least they offer a place where people commit to a certain period of time with whatever it is. So if I'm going to, say, the Powerhouse, or I'm going to, say, Cooper Hewitt with my family, I'm setting aside a block of time, and I'm saying I'm going to spend this amount of time at that place. So then it's the museum's responsibility to use that commitment of time audiences have made or visitors have made to make most use of that time. And I think, you know, Xerxes Mazda up at ROM in Toronto said something to me a couple of months ago that was really, you know, really stuck with me, which was, we have, you know, the ROM, he was talking about the ROM collections, and his thing was, we have all these amazing things from, you know, and it's our responsibility as museum people to tell people why these are so amazing and why they should care about them. And that if we don't, because our signage is bad, our labels are bad, or we don't explain them well, then we haven't done our job. You know, we need to assert that these things are, you know, 3,000 years old and they really matter because we can't just accept that they should matter because they're old. Most people don't even know. You know, I think that there's a responsibility on the museum professional to assert why this stuff, why we should care about this stuff, and sometimes that's much easier to assert when it's physically present, right? Really hard to assert that the thing that matters on your screen really matters, because it could just be anything. It could be anywhere, right?
Or, you know, the equivalent of seeing that fantastic collection of you know, early video games piled up on shelves at your friend's place, as opposed to seeing it displayed properly at a museum. It does. You're right. It's different.
Yeah, but I think your friend would say that your friend who has that video game, all those video games piled up on her shelf, she has put them on that shelf in a particular way to assert that they also matter in her life, right? And I think, you know, that's also an interesting thing. I mean, I look at the video games in the Internet archive now, and the work that Jason Scott's done there with emulation and the JS MES conversion, you know, running effectively MAME and MES inside JavaScript. It's incredible, right? And what's interesting there is that he's actually, you know, the access to that is in a way where you have the, I guess, what were they? The sort of banner header boards that used to sit on top of the cabinets as the interface to browse them. It's kind of like, hey, these are the visual cues that remind you that this game actually felt like this, because he knows that emulation is not, it's a way of preserving some of the experience, but not all of the experience. But it's the best way we've got at the moment, so, you know.
Yeah, it's a. I think too that where we're heading with the kinds of experiences in museums, I do feel like we at the moment have far too many compartments, like within museums, to say, this is the education role, this is the markets' role, this is, and I can see some ways that they're important, but if you look everywhere around whatever industry you're in, they're all changing in the same way, and this sort of very specialized kind of role anywhere, I think is a bit redundant. I think that it'd be nice to see spaces within museums where people learn on the job. I always felt that was one of the issues with a place like the Powerhouse, is how do you retrain people in a space that's very specialised. If you keep them in compartments, then it's very difficult to learn new skills. So I think that sort of opening up of the physical spaces, of pushing people together into groups, is a really good thing. Yep. Have you seen much of that happening?
No, I mean it's different. I mean, I think there is a need for. I mean, I think part of the challenge with specialisation, the desirable employee now is, the T-shaped person who has a breadth of experience but then has one speciality. The problem, I think, is that there aren't enough T-shaped people, and there aren't enough opportunities for people who perhaps have breadth but no depth, or people who have singular depth but no breadth, to change into a T-shaped type of person. You still need deep specialities. I think that there's more than enough in any of those fields that you mentioned, even marketing and comms, education, digital. There are deep needs for specialty, but there needs to be T-shaped individuals there who also get why they're doing it, and that specialty isn't about. That specialisation isn't something that stays static in time. Their speciality has to continue to grow. So just because you know how to do digital preservation in 2015 doesn't mean that digital preservation as a field stands still. Similarly, you might know how to do really amazing curriculum-focused education experiences for school kids of 2015. You can bet it isn't going to be the same in 2020. So, it's that need for the organisation to invest in its people. And again, that comes back to the start of this chat. I think in the States, with all the money being tied up with project-oriented funding models, that you don't have that opportunity necessarily, or the organisation doesn't have the doesn't have the natural commitment to invest in long-term development of staff, because there's a project-oriented staff who may be on for a year or maybe 3 years. And similarly, in the other side of the world, say in America, say in Australia, you have shrinking staff generally, and people are picking up broader and broader bunches of work, which means they're not getting any opportunity to specialise because they're being pulled in 50 directions. The webmaster's got to do some marketing because they're running all those social media channels as well, and those social media channels change almost as fast as the programming languages and methodologies that they've got to do in their webmastery, and then they've got to build. It's just crazy. So I think it's very hard in times where staff are scarce, and it's very hard in times when staff are project-centered. So I don't know if there's any. I mean, there's no way out of that. I think it's not easy. We're always talking, my team, about the just lack of bodies. You just need more bodies. We could train up people to do heaps of really amazing stuff, but we just need bodies. If we don't have the bodies, we can't do this stuff. There are some things that just need people. If you don't have the people, then we can forget about doing all the things. So no matter what they are.
I
You
think
know,
that
yeah.
I was just going to say that in some ways, the smaller museum is, in some ways, could be seen as a training ground for developing some of these broader skills. And often it's the larger institution that trains those more specialized skills. Do you think there's somewhere that, more sort of sharing of staff or kind of moving staff around might benefit from these,
Yeah,
training
maybe.
different skills?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I think that we would be certainly useful to have a more porous set of museum professional relationships, I guess, where people could move between institutions more easily. Um, I just think that in times where money is scarce, people want to hold on to the people they have, and they don't want them to move around and as much as perhaps would help. Um, Also, I don't know. I mean, I think very small museums have staff who necessarily have incredibly broad skill sets because you need to do everything. But I don't necessarily think you have the opportunity when you are doing everything to be able to focus and think about, get some time and space to think about 5 years, 10 years, 25-year plans and think about, okay, where do we need to be in 25 years' time, and this is what we're starting now. You just don't have the time to do that. The larger museums, on the other hand, suffer from, are starting to suffer from the same issues. That the staff also don't have time because they're doing too many things. So, I guess my current thing is, I think we need to stop doing a bunch of stuff and refocus on the things that we really need to do. And part of that's been what the Cooper Hewitt experience has been like. I think there was something really good in shutting the museum for three years and using that time of physical rebuilding to really reconceptualize what the museum should do. I don't think we did it enough, but we did it a bit at least. And I think what we've implemented is testament to, I guess, well, it's a concreting of that process, an outcome. But not everyone can afford to close for 3 years. And Cooper Hewitt, it got pretty tight there in terms of could we stay closed for the amount of time we needed to actually get the stuff done, and by no means was it finished. If we'd finished it, we wouldn't have done the right thing, of course, but I think that there was a time there was like, we have to open the doors, we need revenue coming in, otherwise we're going to be in serious trouble. So that's a hard thing.
Was it an opportunity to really look at these training staff, or was it a restructure of staff, or how did that work during that 3-year period?
I guess there was a focusing on a singular goal. We opened the museum, rethink a bunch of stuff, and it wasn't so much a retraining, but I think a lot of the stuff we did was just a focusing of mission, focusing of purpose, and certainly the work that my teams were doing and involved with across the museum, there was very much a sense of, hey, we're building all of these things, we're going to prototype them, you tell us what is going to work and what isn't going to work, and we'll iterate on those and continue to work on those things. And we had a pretty, we changed a lot of processes and stuff as a result of building different sorts of products and services. Those products and services couldn't have even been prototyped if we were doing, business as usual and trying to roll out X amount of exhibits per year. Just not going to happen. You need to stop doing exhibits to be able to create infrastructure, both psychological and physical. You need to be able to think about what exhibitions you may want to do and how exhibitions should actually be, or the sort of institution you might want to become. I think there's never enough time. There just isn't. And I think part of doing this stuff well is about delivering stuff. I think there's a thing that we always talk about, and the tech world always talks about too, is this shipping product. You have to ship stuff. If you don't ship it, it doesn't exist. And so, you know, we made a pretty big effort to ship as many things as we could, and that's that's sort of the proof, I guess, is that if you don't ship, then it doesn't exist. So I think museums struggle with that, and that's part of a cultural thing, that museums like to get everything perfect before it ships. I think in my world, things are never perfect, so you ship and then you improve. But that's a services model rather than I guess a finished product model. Got a lot, you know. I've got a whole bunch of words half written about that, and that's something I've been thinking about for the last 5 years, I guess, is sort of the servicization of museums, and how we need to shift from the exhibitions as product model to a services model. And what does exhibitions as a service look like? What does that mean? And, you know, how do we change how we produce stuff and how we think about stuff to turn them into services? So yeah, we saw that a bit at the Powerhouse too, where we were thinking about, all right, well, this exhibition brings this audience in. What is the next exhibition that will serve that audience as well? So the exhibitions become part of the service delivery to meet audience needs, visitor needs. Could also be to meet researcher needs too, but because those researcher needs don't ever stay static. It's actually about delivering services rather than products. But everything in the museum world, I guess, as opposed to a library world, has been designed around product delivery, product development and delivery, and those products are almost like this kind of year's Barbie model, and then we're going to have another sort of Barbie the next year, and then another sort the next year, rather than a services model, which would be a very different way of providing toys on demand. You know, which wouldn't be about creating this, you know what I mean. I'm thinking through this still, as you can probably guess, but I think there's a lot in that. So I think there's a lot in sort of how we work that is very much based on an industrial product line sort of scenario, which just doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work in the performing arts. It doesn't work in museums. It's a 20th century production model. But it's very hard to shift out of that. You know, we've all been trained in that, or different people in the museum have been trained in that, and the structure of the museum, right down to the way it raises money, is all based on that too. It's not, whether it's a government museum or an American-style philanthropic non-profit, it's all based around that. You know, what corporates will come and sponsor is a product. They want to put their name on this exhibition. They don't want to put their name on, you know, a series of things that, you know, yeah, it's kind of hard, right? So anyway, this is unformed, so I need to finish writing these words that I've been trying to write for forever, because it's just hard. It's just hard. So anyway.
Yeah, I think that we're clearly kind of what I find myself bumping up against a lot is trying to produce reusable commodities, you know, resources that can be repurposed and used for other things, not for creating product. And that's what I find at the moment, is that people want product. They want an end thing, and they want to know what it is and when it's going to be delivered. And we're saying, well, here's a whole lot of stuff. Here's a lot of shit. You take some of that and use that. You're skillful at marketing. You can use that to do. We've cleared it. We've made sure it's edited. You can do whatever you like with it. Now it's all copyright cleared. Off you go. And I think that's the thing that I'm kind of hoping we'll get more of, where we're making things that are more shareable, not just within the museum, but external to the museum as well.
Yeah.
And hopefully other people will be doing it too. But.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, it's a hard thing. I don't think there's the economic models to support that yet. I just don't think. You know, I think for us, what we try to do at Cooper Hewitt is to make sure that in producing the products that we have to produce, some of the process generates that material that has longer life, and we begin to transfer from a product model into a services model. But I don't know, you know, it's one of those things that I guess we'll figure out over the next however long. Whether we have time, I don't know, you know, whether we have time to do that, and whether you know, once you start to move into services and you start to reconceptualize what your institution is for in terms of meeting human needs, then you have a whole bunch of competitors you didn't think about that also fulfill those human needs, that have completely different operating models and resource bases and financial structures and all of that. You know, I think if we're in the entertainment game and we're about filling out families' weekends for a couple of hours at a time, then we're up against the cinemas and all the other things, and the local park and the beach. If we're about meeting the needs of scholars and researchers, well, then we're up against a whole bunch of other things as well. And we haven't necessarily thought enough about how those, I guess, user needs are met in other ways, and what unique things museums bring to those needs and the fulfillment of those needs, which of course we know we can do. We know we provide a unique something. I think we're just a bit bad at articulating exactly what that is. Not that that should ever stay static. I don't think that these human needs change over time too. You know, so it's not an end game thing.
Well, thanks very much, Seb. I think we might just stop the broadcast here, but maybe we could try another one some other time. But it's
cool,
been
mate.
great talking to you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no worries, eh?
Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers.